How did black families make it through a 1964 Georgia August without a single air conditioner in the house? Not by luck, and not by suffering in silence. Every block ran on a system of tricks refined over generations, and some of them worked so well, the house felt cooler than yours does today. Number 24 on this list dragged the mattresses straight out the front door once the bedrooms got too hot to breathe. Number 23 put a funeral home's name in every hand at church, glued to a wooden stick. And the number one spot goes to the place where the whole neighborhood ended up after supper, because staying cool was never just about temperature. Hit subscribe, because this is the everyday history nobody thought to write down. Here is how black families survived 1960s summers without air conditioning.
Number 25, cross ventilation. Before anybody called it passive cooling, your grandmother called it common sense. Every window in the house came open at sundown. The front door stayed wide, the back door stayed wider, and if you were lucky, a breeze cut straight through the hallway like it had somewhere to be. Screen doors did all the work. In cities like Chicago and Detroit, where families packed into narrow apartments with windows on two sides, this was the first line of defense every single evening. You watched your mother do it, and she watched hers. Number 24, sleeping on the porch. When the bedroom got too hot to breathe, the whole family moved outside. Mattresses got dragged to the front porch. Quilts got spread on the wooden slats. Kids slept head to toe while the adults sat up a little longer, fanning themselves and listening to the neighborhood settle down. In the rural South, especially in Mississippi and Alabama, families slept on screen porches from June straight through August. In the cities, fire escapes turned into open-air bedrooms. Nobody locked the door because everybody on the block was doing the same thing. Number 23, church fans. Every funeral home in the neighborhood printed them by the hundreds. Cardboard on one side, a flat wooden stick glued to the back, and a picture of Jesus or Martin Luther King Jr. on the front. Your grandmother kept a stack of them in the house, one in her purse and two in the glove compartment. Sunday service was where they got the most use, but they followed you everywhere. Sitting on the porch, waiting at the bus stop, standing over the stove because supper still had to get cooked no matter what the thermometer said. There was a rhythm to the way older women fanned themselves, slow and steady, wrist barely moving. The church fan was personal. Number 22, block ice. Before most families had a working refrigerator, the Iceman came down the street with a flatbed truck and a pair of iron tongs. Your grandmother sent you outside with a quarter and told you not to drop it. That block of ice went into a wash tub, and the whole family gathered around it like a campfire in reverse. Kids chipped off slivers with a butter knife and sucked on them until their lips went numb. In cities like Newark and Baltimore, the ice truck was a summer institution well into the 1960s. One block could cool a room for half a day if you set it in front of a fan. The drip pan underneath caught the melt, and the kids drank that too. Number 21, wet sheets hung in doorways. Your mother soaked a bed sheet in cold water, wrung it out just enough so it stopped dripping, and hung it across the bedroom doorway. When the air moved through it, the temperature in that room dropped by several degrees. Families in Memphis and Atlanta did this on the worst nights in July and August, rotating sheets as they dried out. Some women hung them over open windows instead of doorways, turning the whole frame into a cooling vent. The house smelled like clean linen and warm wood. Nobody explained why it worked. They just knew it did. Number 20, cold baths before bed. The bathtub filled up with cool water around 8 o'clock every summer night. Kids went in first, 2 or 3 at a time if the tub was big enough. Then the adults took their turn. In Detroit and Chicago, where brick apartment buildings held the warmth like ovens, A cold bath was the difference between sleeping and lying awake until 3 in the morning. Your skin stayed cool for about an hour afterward, long enough to fall asleep if you kept still. Here's something worth saying out loud. Air conditioning existed in the 1960s. It was in office buildings, department stores, and movie theaters. It was in the homes of families who could afford a window unit and the electric bill that came with it. For most Black families, especially in the urban North and the rural South, neither of those things was within reach. Landlords did not install window units in tenement apartments. Homeowners in Mississippi and Georgia were paying off land that had been in the family for generations, and every dollar went to the mortgage or the grocery bill. Air conditioning was not a choice anyone refused. It was a luxury most people never had access to, so they built something else. Number 19, the box fan in the window. This was the single most important piece of machinery in a Black household during the summer. It cost a few dollars at the hardware store, and it ran from June to September without stopping. Your grandmother set it in the window facing outward at night to pull the hot air out of the house and draw cooler air in through the windows on the other side. During the day, she turned it around to push whatever breeze existed into the room. Every family had at least one. The motor hummed all night long, a sound so constant it became the soundtrack of summer. Kids fell asleep to it. Adults talked over it. When the power went out during a storm, the silence was the first thing anyone noticed. In apartment buildings in Harlem and the south side of Chicago, you could look up at night and see box fans glowing in every other window all the way up to the 5th floor. Hardware stores sold out of them by mid-June. The good ones lasted several summers before the motor gave out, and even then, somebody's uncle knew how to fix it with a screwdriver and a drop of oil. The box fan did not cool the house, it moved the air, and in a home with no other option, moving the air was enough. Number 18, cooking outside. The stove was the enemy from June through August. Turning on 4 burners in a kitchen with no ventilation could push the temperature past 100 degrees in minutes, so your grandmother moved the whole operation outside. A charcoal grill in the backyard handled the meat. A hot plate on the porch took care of the rest. In the rural South, families cooked over open fire pits the same way their parents had, not because they were old-fashioned, but because lighting a fire outside was smarter than lighting one inside. City families got creative. A cast iron skillet balanced on a hibachi grill could fry fish just as well as the kitchen stove, and the heat stayed where it belonged. The kitchen went dark for weeks at a time. Nobody missed it. Number 17, aluminum foil on the windows. Your mother tore off long sheets of foil and pressed them flat against the glass, shiny side facing out. The sunlight bounced off instead of pouring in, and the room behind that window stayed noticeably cooler for the rest of the day. It looked strange from the outside. Anybody walking past knew exactly what it meant. It meant that family was serious about keeping the heat out, and they did not care how the building looked in July. In neighborhoods across Detroit, Memphis, and Atlanta, entire blocks had foil-covered windows from June to September. Today, the same principle shows up in commercial window film that costs many times as much. Your mother figured it out with a roll of foil from the grocery store. Number 16, going down to the basement. If your family had a house with a basement, that underground room became the living room, the bedroom, and the dining room every July and August. The concrete walls stayed cool because they sat below ground level, insulated by the earth on every side. Families dragged chairs, blankets, and a radio down the stairs and spent entire weekends below. Kids played board games on the concrete floor. In cities like Cleveland and Pittsburgh, where summer humidity made ground-level rooms feel like steam baths, the basement was the one room in the house where you could take a full breath without sweating. Churches with basements opened them to elderly members during the worst heat waves. Nobody called them cooling centers, they called them fellowship halls. Number 15, talcum powder and cornstarch. Your grandmother dusted herself with powder after every bath and before she put on her house dress. She dusted the kids too, behind the ears, under the arms, in the creases of the elbows and knees. The powder absorbed the sweat before it had a chance to settle, and it kept the skin from sticking to itself in the heat. Cornstarch worked the same way and cost less. Families that could not afford talcum kept a box of cornstarch in the bathroom cabinet and used it for everything from cooking to cooling down. The smell of talcum powder and a freshly ironed cotton dress is one of the strongest summer memories anyone from that era carries. Clean and cool were the same thing. Number 14, opening the fire hydrant. This one did not happen in every neighborhood, and it was never exactly legal. But in cities like New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago, somebody on the block always had a wrench. The hydrant cap came off, the water shot straight up into the air, and within 5 minutes, every child on the street was soaking wet and screaming with joy. The sidewalk turned into a river. The gutter turned into a wading pool. Mothers watched from stoops and fire escapes while their kids ran through water pressure strong enough to push a grown man backward. The fire department showed up sometimes. They turned it off and drove away. 10 minutes later, somebody opened it again. The city eventually started distributing spray caps, metal attachments that screwed onto the hydrant and turned the blast into a wide fan of mist. It was the city's way of admitting that if they could not stop it, they might as well make it safer. For Black children growing up in neighborhoods where public pools were either segregated, overcrowded, or non-existent, the fire hydrant was the swimming pool. It was free, it was on your block, and it did not require a bus ride to a part of town where your family might not be welcome. The hydrant ran until somebody's father decided it was supper time, and then the whole block went quiet except for the sound of water draining into the sewer grate. Number 13, going to the movies. The movie theater was one of the only public buildings in the neighborhood with air conditioning, and everybody knew it. Your mother did not take you to the movies because she wanted to see the picture. She took you because the theater was cool inside and the house was not. Families bought one ticket and sat through the same film twice. The ushers knew what was happening, and most of them let it go because they understood. In cities where segregation still shaped daily life, Black families could only go to certain theaters. Those theaters were often older and had weaker cooling systems, but even weak air conditioning felt like a miracle after a week of sleeping in a house with no relief. The price of a matinee ticket was the cheapest form of comfort available. Nobody called it a luxury. It was survival with popcorn. Most of the families using these methods had come north during the Great Migration. They left the heat of Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia for the factories and steel mills of Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland, but the summers followed them. The difference was that in the South, the heat came with porches, shade trees, and open land. In the North, it came with brick walls, tar roofs, and apartments stacked 5 stories high with no airflow. The same families who had spent their lives outdoors were now packed into buildings designed to hold heat and release nothing. They adapted the way they always had. Wet sheets that hung from clotheslines in rural yards now hung from shower rods in Bronx bathrooms. These were not folk remedies. They were engineering solutions passed down through generations of people who were never given the luxury of giving up. Number 12, sun tea. A glass jar filled with water and 3 or 4 tea bags set out on the back porch at 9 in the morning and brought inside by 4 in the afternoon. The sun did all the brewing. Your grandmother poured it over a glass packed tight with ice, added sugar while it was still warm enough to dissolve, and set the pitcher on the counter where it stayed until bedtime. Nobody drank hot beverages in the summer. Coffee disappeared from the kitchen until September. The tea was cold, sweet, and always there. Families in Virginia and the Carolinas brewed it stronger. Families in the Midwest added lemon. The glass jar sitting in the sun was as much a part of the summer landscape as the garden hose coiled in the yard. Number 11, cotton house dresses and bare feet. Your grandmother owned exactly two kinds of clothing in the summer: church clothes and house dresses. The house dress was thin cotton, usually a floral print, loose enough that air could circulate underneath and light enough that it dried in minutes if she sweated through it. She wore it from morning until she changed for bed. Shoes came off the second she walked through the front door. Kids went barefoot from June to August unless they were going to church or the store. The soles of their feet turned dark and tough by mid-July. Nobody wore socks inside the house. Getting dressed in the summer took 30 seconds. Modesty had limits, and the thermometer decided where those limits were. Number 10, shade trees and the front yard. Every house in the neighborhood had at least one big tree, and that tree was worth more than the furniture inside. A mature oak or elm could drop the temperature underneath it considerably on a still afternoon. Families arranged lawn chairs under the canopy and spent whole Saturdays outside, reading the newspaper, shelling peas, or just sitting. In the rural South, pecan trees and magnolias did the same work. The shade was not decorative, it was functional. Children played under those trees all day, moving with the shadow as the sun shifted. Your grandfather planted his tree before you were born, knowing it would not grow tall enough to matter for another 20 years. He planted it anyway. Number 9, cold watermelon. The truck came through the neighborhood on Saturdays, stacked with melons so heavy 2 men had to lift them. Your father thumped 3 or 4 before he picked one. A good watermelon sounded hollow when you knocked on it. He carried it inside, and it sat in the refrigerator until it was cold enough to crack open. By late afternoon, the kitchen table was covered in newspaper, and the whole family stood around eating slices with juice running down to their elbows. Seeds got spit into the yard. Rinds went into the garden compost or got pickled by your grandmother if she was in the mood. The watermelon was dessert, hydration, and entertainment all at once. The heat was reason enough. Number 8, the garden hose. If the fire hydrant was the block party, the garden hose was the backyard version. Your father screwed it to the spigot on the side of the house, and from that moment until September, it was the most popular object on the property. Kids ran through the spray in their underwear. Mothers stood in the mist while they hung laundry on the clothesline. The grass turned into mud by mid-July, and nobody cared because the mud was cool under your feet. Sprinkler attachments turned the hose into something closer to a fountain. The oscillating kind swept back and forth across the yard, and children timed their runs to get hit by the full arc of water. In neighborhoods where public pools were off limits or did not exist, the garden hose was the only water recreation most black children had. It required a spigot and a mother who did not mind the water bill going up in August. The garden hose was not a toy, it was infrastructure. Number 7, the wet washcloth on the back of the neck. Your grandmother kept a bowl of ice water on the nightstand and a stack of washcloths next to it. She soaked one, wrung it out, and laid it across the back of your neck. The relief was immediate. The blood vessels in the neck sit close to the surface, and cooling them down drops the whole body temperature faster than almost anything else. She did not know the science behind it. She knew it worked. Kids got a fresh washcloth every time they came inside from playing. Adults draped them over their foreheads while they sat on the porch after supper. Some women froze wet washcloths and handed them out like popsicles. Simple, free, and effective. Number 6, awnings, window shades, and drawn curtains. Every house had heavy curtains or roller shades on the sunny side, and they stayed closed from sunrise until the sun moved past. Your grandmother treated direct sunlight like an intruder. She pulled the shades the same time every morning and did not open them until late afternoon. Metal awnings over the windows kept the sun off the glass entirely, creating a pocket of shade that kept the room behind it several degrees cooler. In the South, wide front porches did the same job, shading the entire front wall of the house. The house looked dark inside during the day, but dark meant cool, and cool was the only thing that mattered between May and October. Number 5, cold suppers. On the hottest nights, your grandmother did not cook at all. Supper was a plate of cold cuts, sliced tomatoes from the garden, leftover cornbread, and a glass of buttermilk. Everything came out of the refrigerator and went straight to the table. No stove, no oven, no extra heat in the kitchen. Potato salad, deviled eggs, and cold fried chicken from the day before made a full meal without raising the temperature of the house by a single degree. Families in the South called it a cold plate. Families in the Midwest just called it supper. The children never complained because cold supper meant cold dessert, and cold dessert usually meant a bowl of peaches and syrup straight from the can or a slice of icebox pie that had been setting up since morning. Number 4, the ice cream truck. You heard it 3 blocks away? That melody coming through a tinny speaker mounted on the roof meant everything was about to stop. Kids dropped whatever they were doing and ran to their mothers for change. The truck crawled down the street at walking speed, and the driver knew every kid by face, if not by name. In neighborhoods where the truck did not come, mothers made their own. Kool-Aid poured into ice cube trays with toothpicks stuck in the middle, frozen solid by afternoon. Dixie cups filled with sweetened condensed milk and vanilla, set in the freezer overnight. The homemade versions never tasted as good as the ones from the truck, but they were free, and there were always enough to share with the kid next door. Number 3, stoop sitting after sundown. Nobody went inside until they had to. The concrete stoop held the heat of the day for about an hour after sunset, and then it cooled enough to sit on. Your grandfather brought a chair, your grandmother brought a fan. The neighbors came over without an invitation because everybody's house was too hot and the street was the only place with a breeze. Conversations lasted until midnight. Children fell asleep on blankets spread across the top step. Somebody always had a radio tuned to a ball game or a jazz station. Fireflies blinked in the yard, and the smell of citronella candles mixed with whatever the family next door had grilled for supper. In cities like Baltimore and Philadelphia, the stoop was the living room from June through September. The heat planned these gatherings. People just showed up. Number 2, the swimming spot. Public pools existed, but for Black families in the 1960s, access depended entirely on where you lived and what the local rules allowed. In cities across the South, pools were segregated by law. In the North, they were segregated by practice. Black children swam in creeks, rivers, quarry ponds, and whatever body of water sat close enough to walk to. In rural Mississippi and Alabama, swimming holes were handed down through families like fishing spots, locations known to the community but never written on any map. City kids found their own places. When public pools did open to Black families, the conditions were often worse than the open water, overcrowded, under-maintained, and scheduled for Black swimmers on specific days, usually right before the weekly cleaning. The swimming hole did not care what day it was. It did not have hours, and it never asked you to leave. Number 1, the front porch at night. Everything on this list led here. The fans pushed the air, the ice cooled the skin, the wet sheets, the cold baths, and the foil-covered windows brought enough comfort to get through the day. But the front porch at night was where all of it came together. Your grandmother sat in her rocking chair. Your grandfather leaned against the railing. The children lay on the wooden planks with their heads in somebody's lap. The neighborhood was quiet enough to hear the crickets and loud enough to hear your neighbor's radio 2 houses down. Nobody was in a hurry. Nobody checked the time. The heat had broken just enough to make the air bearable, and the people you love most in the world were all within arm's reach. Every method aided. This list was about cooling down, but this one was about something else entirely. This was the thing air conditioning eventually replaced. Not just the temperature, the togetherness. Black families did not survive the summer despite the heat. They built a life around it, and the front porch was where that life happened. These 25 methods were not invented. They were inherited, passed from mothers who learned from their mothers in kitchens and on porches across every city and country road where Black families put down roots. The heat has not changed, but the way families deal with it has. Which of these hit closest to home for you?